from this summit to strengthen our resolve for self-sufficiency as a continent. Africa must innovate, industrialize, and participate at all levels of the value chain of her natural resources, whilst applying economic modalities that support thriving people and nature. Excellencies, South Africa therefore urge Africa to advance implementation of what we agreed to. 1, the ratification of the Maputo Convention. 2, implementation of the Africa Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. 3, creation of an Africa Biodiversity Fund. 4, development of national biodiversity bioeconomic strategies by each member state. 5, development of Africa's biodiversity bioeconomy strategy. 6, continue on the reform of the financial architecture and emphasizing in global platforms that developed countries should meet their obligations in line with the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and capabilities. Madam Chair, let me once more urge all countries that are yet to ratify the Maputo Convention to consider this important step as we move towards leveraging our biodiversity for Africa's prosperity. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, South Africa. Passo a palavra à Costa do Marfim, Côte d'Ivoire, please.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Excellence, Madame la Présidente en exercice de l'Union africaine. Excellence, Madame la Vice-Présidente.
The Deputy Chairperson of the AUC, Your Excellency, the Chairperson of this session, Your Excellency, representing heads of state and government, the representatives of regional institutions and partners, allow me to convey the greetings of Excellency Alassane Ouattara to his counterpart, President Advocate Duma Boko, for organizing this important summit. Côte d'Ivoire lauds the initiative of Botswana and the African Union Commission to organize the First African Biodiversity Summit in Gaborone. We'd like to thank all the states and actors who have made this summit a decisive moment for our continent. Biodiversity is our natural heritage and the foundation of development for our continent. In our country, as is the case in other countries, biodiversity guarantees food security through sectors like agriculture, fisheries, and others. It contributes to the well-being of humans through ecosystems that are crucial for their welfare and resilience in the face of climate change. Côte d'Ivoire reaffirms its commitment to integrate biodiversity protection and conservation in all the sector policies such as agriculture, land planning, infrastructure, as well as national development plans. Côte d'Ivoire commits to protecting protected sites and economic corridors through concrete measures such as combating poaching and illegal logging. We want inclusive use of natural resources, bringing on board communities, indigenous populations, and Côte d'Ivoire is committed to mobilizing public and private funding for the restoration and protection of nature using mechanisms that are tailored to Africa's realities. We would like to urge the international partners to respect Africa's priority biodiversity and assist Africa to overcome challenges. Côte d'Ivoire is ready to strengthen its regional international cooperation and contribute to the adoption of the Gaborone Declaration. To conclude, I call upon all of us to conserve our biodiversity as an investment for prosperity, security, and the well-being of future generations. Thank you.
Passo agora a palavra
I would
à
like to give the
Etiópia.
floor
Muito
to
obrigada, Côte
Ethiopia
d'Ivoire.
now. Thank you, Côte d'Ivoire.
Thank you, Your Excellency Anna Paul, Minister of Environment of the Republic of Angola, Your Excellency Selma Didi, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Your Excellency Honorable Winter Molotsi, Minister of Environment and Tourism of Botswana, Your Excellency Moses Velakati, Commissioner for Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy and Sustainable Environment of the African Union Commission, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by conveying warm greetings from His Excellency Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to you, Chair, who could not join this august body today due to conflicting schedules. I would also like to use this opportunity to express our heartfelt gratitude for the traditional and warm hospitality accorded to our delegation since our arrival in this beautiful city of Gaborone. We gather here at a critical moment when the need to protect our planet's natural heritage has never been more pressing. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Ethiopia recognizes that biodiversity is the foundation of our livelihoods, resilience, and shared future. As stated on this summit theme, biodiversity plays an important role in our bid to ensure prosperity. Ethiopia's approach to biodiversity conservation is a blend of science, policy, and community engagement. A key component of this effort is Ethiopia's Green Legacy Initiative, which has significantly advanced biodiversity conservation through the planting of over 48 billion tree indigenous and ecologically suitable tree seedlings across 150 million hectares by the participation of over 25 million Ethiopians since 2019. The program has increased the national forest cover from 70% to over 23% within the first 4 years. Ethiopia has also protected over 14% of its land through national parks and reserves. By protecting biodiversity and promoting sustainable green economy, Ethiopia is leveraging its natural resources to drive economic development. Additionally, through public-private partnership, Ethiopia is focusing on ecotourism development, generating jobs for local communities, and fostering a sense of ownership that encourages conservation rather than exploitation. Our conservation efforts, including watershed development, afforestation, and river rehabilitation, such as the Addis Ababa Riverside projects, are contributing to the growth of the agriculture sector, improving food security, and ensuring harmony between the urban growth and environmental sustainability. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as a result of these efforts, Ethiopia has restored over 7 million hectares of degraded land through community-based watershed management, benefiting more than 12 million rural households. Furthermore, on the second Africa Climate Summit held in Addis Ababa earlier this year, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed announced the establishment of the Africa Climate Innovation Compact and Africa Climate Facility initiatives with the aim of mobilizing $50 billion per annum in catalytic financing through the facility to fund 1,000 continental projects in energy, agriculture, water transport, and resilience by 2030. The initiative affirms Ethiopia's commitment towards our continent's economic progress while conserving its biodiversity. Finally, we commend the government of the Republic of Botswana for convening this inaugural Africa Biodiversity Summit, a very important first step in our bid to showcase our endeavor in biodiversity conservation and also to shape and amplify Africa's common position as we head towards the upcoming global biodiversity summits. I thank you.
Botswana, ministro tem a palavra.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Okay. Yeah, it is a great honor for me on behalf of the government of the people of the Republic of Botswana to address this historic gathering, the First Africa Biodiversity Summit. The First Africa Biodiversity Summit. We meet at a defining moment when the world's attention is once again focused on the urgent need to safeguard the natural systems that sustain all life in our continent. Botswana's commitment to biodiversity conservation is deeply rooted in our constitution, our national vision, and our way of life. Our country is a proud party to a number of multilateral environmental agreements. Through them, Botswana has continued to align national policy and practice with global commitments to conserve nature for present and future generations. In that regard, Botswana has, through the whole government, whole society approach, aligned to the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Targets and currently updating its National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. We also embraced the Trans-Frontier Conservation Areas Program with some notable achievements, especially the Kaza Trans-Frontier Conservation Area. Botswana is also implementing the Biodiversity Finance Initiative to manage and mobilize biodiversity finance through economic incentive for sustainable conservation and management. Your Excellencies, over the years, Botswana has made significant strides in mainstreaming biodiversity across development sectors. Over 40% of our land area is under some form of conservation management through national parks, game reserves, wildlife management areas, and community-based conservation initiatives. Our community-based natural resource management program stands as a pioneering model in linking conservation with rural livelihoods. Moreover, our National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan continues to guide implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, emphasizing restoration, sustainable use, and equitable benefit sharing. In terms of the legislative framework, our access and benefit sharing gives legal effect to the Nagoya Protocol, ensuring fair and equitable sharing of benefits and recognition of traditional knowledge holders. Recent revisions of the Wildlife Conservation and National Parks Act, Environmental Assessment Act, and the Forest Act also serve to strengthen biodiversity governance and conservation management. I wish to further highlight that Botswana has made a high-level commitment under the UNCCD to achieve land degradation neutrality targets. Despite these gains, we are acutely aware of the challenges ahead, such as climate variability, habitat fragmentation, and competing land uses, which continue to test our resilience. But we are not deterred. Botswana is investing in science-based decision-making, strengthening ecosystem monitoring, promoting green growth, and advancing partnerships with local communities, the private sector, and regional institutions. As we look to the future, we believe that through collective African leadership, innovative financing, and effective implementation of our commitments under the CBD and related conventions, we can secure a sustainable future for both people and nature. In that spirit, allow me to extend Botswana's full support to this inaugural summit and to the outcomes it will generate. Let this gathering serve not only as a platform for reflection, but also as a call to action and to unite our efforts, reaffirm our commitments, and ensure that Africa's natural heritage continues to thrive as the foundation of our shared prosperity. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Muito obrigada, caro colega. Passaria então a palavra ao comissário da União Africana para Agricultura, Desenvolvimento Rural, Sustentabilidade, Ambiente e Economia Azul, para fazermos hoje a apresentação da declaração da Cimeira
presentation of the Declaration on Biodiversity in Africa. Honorable Commissioner, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is the African Leaders Gaborone Declaration on Biodiversity. The introductory part, I will just summarize. It starts with we, the heads of state and government of the African Union, together with representatives of regional and international organizations, convened in Gaborone, Republic of Botswana on the 5th November 2025 for the First Africa Biodiversity Summit. And it recalls assembled decisions okay. It's fine. They say they can't hear. This one. Okay. They always say testing 1 2 1 2. So, paragraph 2 just talks about the assembled decision, which decided to convene the First Africa Biodiversity Summit and requested the African Union Commission to organize the First African Biodiversity Summit. And paragraph 3 commends the Republic of Botswana and its president for hosting the First Africa Biodiversity Summit, while paragraph 4, it talks about the African Union Agenda 2063, where nature, endowment, and ecosystems need services are healthy, valued, and protected. And it also talks to the Gaborone Declaration for Sustainability in Africa, which was adopted in 2012, and is ideal to ensure the contribution of natural capital to sustainable economic growth in our various countries. While paragraph 5, it also recalls the assembled decision on the Pan-African Action Agenda on ecosystem restoration for increased resilience. Paragraph 6 talks to the recognition that the second 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063 includes biodiversity through sustainable environment and climate resilience. Paragraph 7 recognizes that Africa is home to more than a quarter of the global biodiversity, with immense forests, savannas, woodlands, fresh water, and marine ecosystems that supports agriculture, fisheries, and tourism. Paragraph 8 affirms that the biodiversity is the backbone of Africa's economies and a strategic asset for economic development and poverty reduction, while paragraph 9 recognizes the urgent need to safeguard Africa's rich and diverse ecosystems. Paragraph 10 recognizes is recognizing the vital role of transboundary conservation areas in Africa as models for safeguarding biodiversity at scale while fostering regional integration. Paragraph 11 recalls that the Africa Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan and Sustainable Forest Management Framework for Africa, Africa Strategy on Combating Illegal Exploitation and Illegal Trade in Wild Fauna and Flora in Africa, the African Union Great Green Wall Initiative Strategy, as well as the 10-year implementation framework needs to the ecosystem restoration and livelihoods resilience 2024-2035. While paragraph 12 welcomes the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and the Global Biodiversity Framework. Paragraph 13 acknowledges the role of African Ministerial Conference on Environment in providing strategic policy direction on environmental priorities, including those related to biodiversity. Paragraph 14 expresses deep concern that Africa's rich biodiversity is under severe threat which undermines food security, health, economic prospects, and resilience. Paragraph 15 emphasizes that biodiversity loss, climate change, land degradation, desertification, and pollution are all interlinked crises escalating risks to Africa's development. Paragraph 16 emphasizes the critical role of Africa-led financing through the continent's own financial institutions and is urging member states to accelerate the ratification of their founding agreements. Strengthening this institution will improve their ability to mobilize resources and fund biodiversity financing in Africa, advancing the continent's development and sustainability goals. While paragraph 17 recognizes the role of One Health approach in protecting biodiversity and securing human health and well-being. Paragraph 8 is concerned that biodiversity financing is grossly inadequate to meet Africa's needs, and noting that with urgency that innovative and increased financing from both domestic and international resources is critical to implement the biodiversity goals. Paragraph 19 affirms that people are at the center of biodiversity actions and recognizes traditional knowledge, custodianship, and sustainable practices of local communities, and the indispensable contribution of women and youth in safeguarding Africa's biodiversity. Paragraph 20 reiterates that conservation of biodiversity, sustainable use of its components, and fair and equitable sharing of the benefits of nature offer tremendous opportunities for socio-economic development in Africa. So determined to act decisively in unity and urgency to reverse biodiversity loss and ensure the benefits of Africa's natural heritage are secured for present and future generations. Recognizing that the unity of Africa's voice on biodiversity must be grounded in shared values, ethical stewardship, and the principle of ecological justice, and reaffirming our collective duty to safeguard the continent's natural heritage as the moral foundation of Africa's renaissance. Therefore, we hereby declare and commit as follows. Paragraph 21, we declare and commit as follows: to strengthen biodiversity governance at all levels in Africa, ensuring clarity, coherence, and accountability across institutions, including updating and harmonizing policies, laws, and institutions to implement the African Union's Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, Africa's Strategy on Combating Illegal Exploitation and Illegal Trade in Wild Fauna and Flora, Africa Blue Economy Strategy, Pan-African Action Agenda on Ecosystem Restoration for Increased Resilience, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework effectively. Therefore, to urge all member states to update and implement their national biodiversity strategies and action plans in alignment with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and to integrate these strategies into national development plans, sectorial policies, and budgets. Paragraph 22, to mainstream biodiversity considerations into agriculture, fisheries, forestry, mining, energy, infrastructure, manufacturing and processing, tourism, biotechnology, and other sectors, so that conservation and development objectives are mutually reinforcing. While paragraph 23, we commit to promote ecological justice and the fair distribution of biodiversity benefits, ensuring that local communities and indigenous peoples are adequately compensated for conservation costs, ecosystem services, and loss of access to natural resources resulting from global environmental policies. Paragraph 24, we commit to strengthen institutional coordination through whole-of-government approaches for coherent implementation of biodiversity commitments by establishing or reinforcing interministerial committees at national level to oversee policy integration and implementation. Paragraph 25, to request the African Union Commission, in collaboration with partners, to enhance continental coordination, including through establishment of an Africa Biodiversity Coordination Mechanism to promote synergy of efforts across member states and regional economic communities and initiatives. Paragraph 26, to encourage those member states that have not yet done so to ratify and effectively implement the revised 2003 African Convention on the Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, as well as relevant global and regional environmental treaties and protocols on biodiversity. Paragraph 27, to urge all member states that have not yet done so to ratify the agreement under the United Nations Convention of the Law on the Law and Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction to jointly seek designation of high quality, effectively managed high seas marine protected areas. Paragraph 28, to reiterate the importance of developing accountability mechanisms to deliver on the commitment to halt and reverse deforestation and land degradation by 2030, as provided in the Addis Ababa Declaration adopted at the 19th Ordinary Session of the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment, thereby driving global progress and promoting greater equity between forest protection standards. Paragraph 29, to review and update national and regional biodiversity-related laws and policies to address current challenges and to create an enabling environment for green economic growth and strengthen the capacity for compliance, enforcement, and implementation of these laws and policies. Paragraph 30, to ensure whole-of-society approach and the full and effective participation of local communities, civil society, women and youth in biodiversity decision-making and action. Paragraph 31, we commit to jointly work to ensure all wild species which are threatened by unsustainable direct exploitations are identified, monitored, adequately protected under international multilateral environment agreements, as well as domestic law and restored through effective recovery interventions. Paragraph 32, to enhance cross-community cooperation and regional solidarity through participatory platforms connecting scientists, traditional custodians, the youth, policymakers, ensuring that Africa's biodiversity knowledge is shared, protected, and applied for collective prosperity. Paragraph 33, to strengthen and expand transboundary conservation areas and protected areas, thereby contributing to the implementation of the global commitment to protect 30% of the planet by 2030, as enshrined in the Target 3 of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, as flagship initiatives for safeguarding Africa's shared ecosystems and species. Paragraph 34, to invest in harnessing the full potential of biodiversity and traditional knowledge to drive sustainable economic growth, diversification, and resilience in Africa, including nature-based economic opportunities, sustainable biotrade and bioindustries, fairly shared with resource custodians to unlock regional and international markets for biodiversity-based products to ensure to enhance Africa's competitiveness in the global bioeconomy. While in paragraph 35, we commit to call upon member states to develop bioeconomy strategies and action plans in order to sustainably harness the full economic potential of Africa's natural capital, and request the AUC and its partners to mobilize financial resources for this initiative. Paragraph 36, to integrate the value of biodiversity into national accounting and planning processes so as to make nature's contribution visible in our economic decisions and attract investments and development finance into biodiversity conservation. Paragraph 37, to enhance data and information capabilities in order to guide the management and financing mechanisms on Africa's biodiversity. Paragraph 38, to strengthen and empower a network of technical regional centers, TRCs, as the backbone of Africa's biodiversity knowledge infrastructure, and integrate the TRCs into continental governance to promote science policy interface. Paragraph 39, to scale up ecosystem-based approaches and ecosystems restoration to contribute to climate mitigation while safeguarding biodiversity. While paragraph 40, to foster greater synergy in implementing the Convention on Biological Diversity, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the United Nations National Convention on Combating Desertification, commonly known as the Rio Convention, and other relevant environment-related conventions at national level, ensuring that climate finance and adaptation plans incorporate biodiversity goals as a cost-effective means to achieve both diversity and climate objectives. Paragraph 41, to improve and enhance wetlands management as a tool to broader biodiversity conservation. Paragraph 42, to significantly increase domestic finance and mobilize international financing for biodiversity and aspire to allocate at least 1% of our GDP progressively towards biodiversity as an investment in our economies and well-being. Paragraph 43, to reaffirm Africa's leadership in shaping the global biodiversity agenda and to demand fair representation in international decision-making bodies related to the environment and natural resources. Africa must no longer be the object, but the subject of biodiversity governance. Paragraph 44, to endorse the Wildlife for Climate Action Agenda and Declaration and call upon the rest of the world to support Africa and Africa's wildlife resources on this cause. Paragraph 45, to develop and implement national biodiversity finance plans to close the funding gap. 46, paragraph 46, we commit to promote biodiversity opportunities by attracting private investments and stimulate regular trade to ensure sustainability of Africa's biodiversity. Paragraph 47, to urge member states to implement the US $1.2 billion per year Africa Keystone Protected Areas Partnership Initiative and mobilize additional resources for other landscape ecosystems. Paragraph 48, to call upon strategic development partners to honor their commitments to provide at least US $30 billion per year by 2030 in biodiversity finance to developing countries, as agreed in the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and call for the establishment of accountability mechanisms to track the delivery of the global commitments and promises by 2027. Paragraph 49, we commit to urge the Global Environment Facility and the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund and other multilateral funding mechanisms, including Economic Biodiversity Fund, Cali Fund, and the Green Climate Fund, to prioritize equitable access for African countries and invite philanthropists, the private sector, and multilateral development banks to significantly scale up and ease access to funding for Africa's biodiversity management efforts. Paragraph 50, we commit to request the creation of African platforms for sharing best practices on innovative financial instruments such as biodiversity credits, such as biodiversity credits, green and blue bonds, and payments for ecosystem services. Paragraph 51, we commit to call for the establishment of an African Biodiversity Fund to serve as a dedicated, equitable, and accessible financing mechanism for biodiversity in Africa, and request the African Union Commission and the African Development Bank to develop the modalities for operationalizing the fund. Paragraph 52, to invite the African Development Bank, regional African financial institutions, and member states to create complementary financing initiatives, including blended finance, such as biodiversity credits and offsets, green and blue bonds, and payment for ecosystem services schemes that leverage public and private capital. Paragraph 53, we commit to re-emphasize Africa's call for reforms of global financial mechanisms and architecture to give developing countries better access to biodiversity-related financing to meet their needs. While in paragraph 54, we commit to speak with one voice to champion our common priorities in global biodiversity forums by enhancing continental coordination and leadership in international environmental engagements, strengthening the African groups of negotiators on biodiversity-related negotiations, and engaging local communities, women, the youth, civil society, academia, and the private sector. Paragraph 55, to promote cross-sectoral partnerships among governments, civil society, and the private sector to foster innovative approaches and nature-positive investments that support the transition to sustainable economies while conserving biodiversity and enhancing ecosystem resilience across the continent in line with the Gaborone Declaration for Sustainability in Africa. Paragraph 56, we commit to integrate biodiversity education in national curricula and civic programs, cultivating an African ecological consciousness that values harmony with nature, self-reliance, and stewardship as essential virtues for sustainable prosperity. Paragraph 57, we also commit to champion capacity building, technical and scientific cooperation, and technological transfer, including the removal of barriers to access appropriate technologies for biodiversity monitoring, sustainable management and use, as well as nature-based economic development. Paragraph 58, we commit to increase investment to bridge science, technology, and innovation gaps so that African institutions and enterprises are equipped to implement advanced biodiversity tools, including digital technologies for research and development. Paragraph 59, to entrust the African Union Commission in collaboration with member states, regional economic communities, united agencies, and relevant partners with the task of tracking and facilitating the implementation of the commitments made in this declaration. Paragraph 6, we commit to request the African Union Commission, in collaboration with the Economic Commission for Africa, the ECA, and the United Nations Environmental Programme, UNEP, to prepare a quadrennial report on the progress achieved in the implementation of this declaration for presentation at each African Biodiversity Summit. Paragraph 61, to recognize that biodiversity is key to Africa's ecological and economic sovereignty. We are uniting our forces to build a green, clean, and resilient continent by 2063. We commit and resolve that this Gaborone declaration on the First Africa Biodiversity Summit shall serve as the cornerstone of Africa's collective roadmap to restore the sacred balance between people and nature, to harness biodiversity for shared prosperity, and to uphold Africa's sovereign right to determine its environmental destiny, and its commitments will serve as the foundation of Africa's roadmap on leveraging biodiversity for Africa's prosperity. This adopted in Gaborone, Botswana, on the 5th of November 2025 by the heads of state and government of the African Union. I thank you.
Muito obrigada, Comissário da União Europeia para a Agricultura, Desenvolvimento Rural, Sustentabilidade, Ambiente e Economia Azul. Foi aqui apresentada a declaração com 62 pontos, que foi debatida não só no segmento técnico,
not only during the technical sessions, but also yesterday during the ministerial meeting. I would like it to be approved now. Would like the declaration for the Biodiversity Summit, First Biodiversity Summit in Africa. The declaration has been adopted. Thank you.
Seguidamente, passaremos a vídeo sobre o Atlas do Capital Natural de África. Órgãos de comunicação, vídeo, por favor.
Welcome. Today we're diving into the Africa Natural Capital Atlas to explore the continent's immense natural wealth and the challenges it faces. Africa, rich in resources and biodiversity, plays a crucial role on the global stage. Africa, the world's second largest and second most populous continent, spans nearly 30 million square kilometers and is home to about 1.5 billion people. By 2100, this population is expected to reach nearly 3.8 billion.
The UN Environment Programme, in collaboration with the African Development Bank, is pleased to present to you the Atlas of Africa's Natural Capital. The Atlas was requested by the African Ministerial Conference on Environment at its 17th Ordinary Session. The Atlas, which examines Africa's natural capital, its forests, its freshwater bodies, its critical minerals, its green energy sources, among other things, highlights that while Africa is richly endowed, its natural capital is facing great economic destruction. Therefore, we need to support Africa's economic development while focusing on restoring and protecting its natural capital. We need to invest in ecosystem-based adaptation, and we need to prioritize actions that preserve and protect Africa's natural capital assets. We can only do this with the science and the data and information that has been provided by this Natural Capital Atlas.
The continent boasts the Congo Basin, the world's second largest rainforest, home to 25% of global biodiversity. Africa also holds 8% of global natural gas and 12% of oil reserves, along with over 60% of the world's undeveloped arable land and 30% of global mineral reserves. Africa's natural capital is crucial for its economic development and population dynamics. Natural capital typology. The importance of integrating natural capital into policies for balanced and sustainable development is emphasized. Key drivers of change: population growth, urbanization, economic development, technological advancements, and climate change are key drivers affecting Africa's natural resources. Changing natural capital and impact on people. The continent's terrestrial resources are vital for economic stability and well-being. Effective monitoring and evaluation are essential for sustainable management. Freshwater, ocean, and marine resources. Sustainable management strategies like the blue economy and integrated water resources management are crucial. Case studies illustrate changes in water resources due to seasonal variations and human activities. Minerals and mining. Africa's mineral wealth holds great potential, but strategies for inclusive and sustainable growth are needed to ensure long-term benefits. Energy. With diverse renewable and non-renewable energy resources, transitioning to more renewable sources is necessary to meet the continent's energy needs.
I believe that having an immense natural resource in Africa would be considered as an opportunity for meeting the socio-economic and environmental needs of Africans. For this to happen, all African countries should identify their unique national natural capital and understand that it is the domestic solution which will leapfrog them from poverty to prosperity. Secondly, they should work towards regional integrity and champion the goal of growing green together. They should adopt a genuine and harmonized approach and enact policies on natural resource management in such a way that it benefits all.
Impact of climate change and natural hazards. Rising temperatures and extreme weather events are accelerating the depletion of natural capital, impacting ecosystems and human well-being. Building back better. Promoting nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions like restoring forests and leveraging job programs are key to addressing contemporary environmental challenges. Natural capital and economic growth. Moving beyond GDP to the Inclusive Wealth Index, which balances economic growth with environmental stewardship and social equity, offers a more comprehensive view of economic health. Challenges and opportunities. Despite these riches, Africa faces significant challenges. Agriculture, a cornerstone of the economy, employs 2/3 of the workforce, but remains the most food insecure region globally. In 2022, nearly 20% of Africans were undernourished. The manufacturing sector is minimal, and intracontinental trade is low, necessitating efforts to boost trade and diversify exports. Land degradation affects 80% of Africa's population, impacting agriculture and forests. However, initiatives like protected areas and the Central African Forest Initiative aim to tackle these issues. Africa's freshwater and marine resources are vital, yet face threats like overfishing and groundwater depletion. With significant renewable energy potential, investments in solar, wind, and geothermal energy could transform the energy landscape. Climate change poses severe risks, making effective disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation policies critical. Africa's natural capital is a tremendous asset that can pave the way for sustainable and inclusive growth. By addressing these challenges and leveraging resources wisely, the continent can shape a brighter, greener future.
Muito obrigada mais uma vez. Passaria então ao momento de mensagens de apoio e começaria primeiro pelo vice-ministro do Egito. Seguidamente teremos então a declaração da juventude. Tem a palavra.
We are going to have the youth declaration. Egypt, you have the floor. 3 minutes, please.
Your Excellencies, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, first I would like to thank very much the government of Botswana for the hospitality and hosting this very important summit, the first summit for biodiversity in Africa. I would like also to convey the greetings, our deep greetings of President, His Excellency the President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the President of Egypt, to His Excellency Advocate Duma Boko, the President of Botswana. Your Excellencies, it is a pleasure to join you today at this important continental event, which convenes at a very important moment of our world and our African continent, which is rich with its natural and biological diversity in light of the escalating interconnections of biodiversity to other environmental challenges, including climate change, pollution, desertification, drought. The convening of the African Biodiversity Summit for the first time reflects Africa's increasing recognition of the need to place biodiversity at the center of sustainable development pathways as a fundamental driver for economic and social prosperity and as an integral component in achieving the aspirations of Agenda 2063 and advancing joint action under the African Union framework. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa today holds a historical opportunity to reinforce its global leadership in the biodiversity agenda, not only as one of the richest regions in the world in terms of natural resources, but also as a continent possessing traditional knowledge, accumulated experience, and deeply rooted community models that live in harmony with nature. Our collective contribution to the implementation of the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework will be central to global success, and Africa's united voice will play a decisive role in shaping future negotiation and forging fair and balanced outcomes. In this context, Egypt reaffirm its full support to the African Union and its Commission and its commitment to constructive engagement to advance partnership and develop integrated policy solutions, including enhancing natural-based investments, unlocking innovative financing, and ensuring coherence between national biodiversity strategies and action plans. Our nationally determined contribution for climate change and land degradation neutrally targets. Ladies and gentlemen, from hosting CBD COP14 to hosting UNFCCC COP27 and hosting this year COP24 for Barcelona Convention, Egypt has worked to solidify a cumulative pathway and establishing a constant approach, linking climate change and biodiversity while advancing natural-based solutions as one of the most tangible bridges across climate, environment, and development. Over the past years, Egypt has expanded applied knowledge, strengthened protection and integrated management of coastal, marine, and terrestrial ecosystem, and developed practical models that support community participation and promote sustainable economic opportunity delivered from natural solutions, linking natural investment with green growth and the transition towards bioeconomy. As part of Egypt's firm commitment to implement the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, Egypt has updated its national biodiversity strategy and action plan based on an integrated methodology aligned with national realities and developed through a wide stakeholder engagement.
Sorry, the time. Okay.
So, in conclusion, Egypt strongly believes that Africa's future and its ability to achieve equality development cannot be realized without safeguarding its biodiversity. At the end, I would like to thank you for the government of Botswana for hosting this very important summit, and also thank you.
Passemos então seguidamente à declaração da
Let's now
juventude.
go to the Youth Declaration. 3 minutes, please.
Good afternoon. We stand on the already established protocol. My name is Irene Natkunda, and I'll be reading the Youth Declaration. First, as youth delegates gathered at the First African Biodiversity Summit, we are proud to lend our voices in support of the Africa Convention on Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. This convening could not be more timely. Africa is one of the most biodiverse regions on Earth, and there has never been a better moment to unite around the protection and sustainable stewardship of our natural heritage. Now, fellow delegates, we will be reading part of the Africa Youth Declaration, and we have submitted a few copies at the protocol desk for distribution. We, the African youth, united in our diversity, culture, and shared heritage, extend our deepest gratitude to the government of Botswana and the African Union for convening the First Africa Biodiversity Summit, a timely, visionary, and historical gathering that has given young people from across the continent a vital platform to voice our commitment and call to action for biodiversity conservation and sustainable prosperity. Our demands as youth of Africa, we outline the following as essential measures to ensure our full and meaningful participation in biodiversity governance. These actions are necessary for delivering the commitments of the Global Biodiversity Framework, and achieving Africa's sustainable development vision. We demand the full and formal inclusion of African youth in the formulation, review, and alignment of the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plans, as mandated under Target 22 of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework to uphold intergenerational equity and ensure long-term effectiveness of accountability of biodiversity governance across the continent. We call for strengthened and equitable partnerships between youth-led organizations and key actors, including governments, private sector and academia and civil society, ensuring that youth are recognized and engaged as equal stakeholders in the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of biodiversity policies, programs, and activities across Africa. African youth demand for access to direct financing through direct investments to scale up innovation, mentor and build youth capacities. Youth-led initiatives are often underfunded, under-resourced, and excluded from mainstream biodiversity financing mechanisms because funding...
Play attention, the time.
Our call to action to governments, civil society, and stakeholders. We urge African nations to provide direct access and sustainable biodiversity financing for youth-led grassroots projects. We encourage governments, civil society, and private sector to meaningfully involve indigenous youth and local youth in decision-making processes. The government should enact legislations that effectively incorporate traditional knowledge into national legal and policy frameworks by first recognizing indigenous peoples and local communities' rights on territories and documenting of traditional knowledge through intergenerational and intersectoral dialogues. And lastly, we would like to thank our organizers and hosts of this summit, and also considering that some of the outcomes of the Africa Youth Biodiversity Summit are well structured into this declaration. So we recognize our indispensable role as youth in shaping the continent's environmental future, and we call upon African leaders to embrace this and take action. We extend our appreciation to the government of Botswana, the African Union, and all partners who enable youth participation in Africa's Biodiversity Summit and created the space for young people to shape this collective vision for a nature-positive and prosperous Africa. This is less time, but we have shared the copies of the entire declaration as a protocol, and we request you to read through and adopt and support young people towards conserving biodiversity. Thank you.
Muito obrigada. E nós reconhecemos o papel.
Thank you very much. We do recognize the role of the youth. Thank you very
Aliança para
much.
Povos Indígenas.
Now we go to the Alliance for Indigenous Peoples and the Local Communities on Conservation in Africa. Please observe the time allotted, 3 minutes.
Aliança para Povos Indígenas e Comunidades Locais para a Conservação em África. Está presente? Is here? Passaria então ao embaixador da União Europeia.
Invites the European Union Ambassador. Sir, you have the floor. Madam, you have the floor.
Distinguished guests and partners, it's an honor for me to be here with you today, and I would like to start by congratulating the government of Botswana and African Union for organizing this landmark event here in Gaborone and in Botswana, which is a shining example of a country with rich biodiversity and abundant wildlife, while also respecting the highest standards of managing its natural resources. I would like to congratulate all delegates and participants for here today for the adoption of the Gaborone Declaration, which outlines the key priorities and commitments to conserve biodiversity and ensures Africa's prosperity. This is a bold step forward, and I'm confident it will guide our collective efforts for the years to come. Your Excellencies, honorable guests, biodiversity is not just an environmental concern, it's a matter of survival and prosperity for our people. It is deeply intertwined with food security, economic resilience, peace and security. Without healthy ecosystems, we cannot secure healthy lives for our people. Protecting nature is an investment in our future and in life itself. As the European Union, we join you in your commitment to the global effort to halt and reverse biodiversity loss, in line with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We have adopted EU strategies and regulations internally, setting ambitious goals to protect the planet's precious ecosystems. While we have made significant progress, we also know that this is only a beginning. The challenges we face are immense, and we need to accelerate our efforts to meet both European Union and global targets by 2030. That is why we are strengthening and deepening our partnerships and looking for new resources and solutions to address the biodiversity crisis in Africa and across the globe. Your Excellencies, this is a global challenge requiring and calling for global cooperation. Biodiversity loss is a challenge that no country alone can face. It is a shared global responsibility. That's why before COP15 summit, President Ursula von der Leyen endorsed the Leaders' Pledge for Nature, which commits us all to halt and reverse biodiversity loss. We have also announced additional funding. We have in fact doubled our external funding for biodiversity, committing a total of 7 billion euros to protect nature around the world. But funding alone is not enough. We must work together in innovative and inclusive ways to ensure that nature is protected for all people. The EU-Africa Partnership on Biodiversity is built on the understanding that both nature and people must be at the heart and center of all of our efforts. The Nature Africa Global Gateway flagship initiative of the European Union is doing exactly that. It brings together nature conservation, green economies, and good governance with people at its heart. This initiative supports women, youth, and indigenous peoples in Africa by creating sustainable value chains and green jobs with an estimated total investment of 1.4 billion euros. Similarly, we are working alongside with our African partners through initiatives like the Great Green Wall and the Sustainable Wildlife Management Program. These programs reconcile conservation with livelihoods, advancing food security and economic opportunities. Your Excellencies, dear guests, yet we cannot close this biodiversity funding gap without mobilizing private funding, which is why we must unlock the potential of private sector. As the European Union, together with our member states, Belgium, France and Germany, we remain committed to contributing to bridging this gap. Earlier this week, we announced new funding to biodiversity financing initiative BioFin, allowing more countries to benefit from financial expertise and tools to bridge the biodiversity financing gap. At the same time, we continue to invest in science, ensuring that our African partners and experts across the continent have the tools and the data they need to drive sustainable solutions. Scientific and technical collaboration between Africa and the European Union is critical to making informed decisions and building a more sustainable future. Your Excellencies, honourable ministers, dear guests, let me conclude by underlining the shared responsibility. The European Union understands that the coordinating across multiple countries, as we do every day with our 27 member states, is both a challenge and an opportunity. That's why we so much celebrate the success of this summit, which is an example of African unity and African leadership in action. We stand shoulder to shoulder with Africa and our partners as we deliver on the commitments of the Global Biodiversity Framework. You can count on the European Union as a reliable partner, committed to supporting the rich biodiversity of this continent in benefit of the people and the planet, and for the generations to come. I thank you for your attention.
Muito obrigada a nós, embaixadora da União Europeia.
Madam Ambassador of the European Union. Now we have AWF.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, partners in conservation. The African Wildlife Foundation stands in unwavering solidarity with the African Union and the member states in advancing biodiversity conservation across our continent. We are proud to align our conservation efforts with the African Union Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. We are committing approximately $30 million annually towards advancing Africa's biodiversity strategy that has been passed today. Our pledge moving forward, we are gathered in this pivotal summit. We pledge to intensify our efforts across our 14 priority landscapes on the continent to achieve measurable biodiversity outcomes for the African Union. So we are pledging to strengthen partnership with African governments, African Union, local communities, and the private sector to scale conservation impact. We are pledging to increase investments in community and youth-centered conservation that recognizes people as essential partners in biodiversity protection. We are pledging to support the implementation of African Union Biodiversity Strategy through technical expertise, on-ground action, and resource mobilization. And lastly, we are pledging to advocate for increased domestic and international financing for Africa's biodiversity. And lastly, we join others in thanking the government of Botswana and the African Union for hosting us here and for a successful summit. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We are the ones that to thank the WWF.
Your Excellencies and distinguished guests, all protocols observed. The Rob Walton Foundation is deeply honored to join you all in advancing Africa's vision for conservation, one that protects nature while strengthening opportunity, security, and prosperity for Africa's people. The Africa Keystone Protected Area Partnership was launched in 2025 in response to calls for action from African leaders. The partnership seeks to support the goals you have already set through the African Union Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, as well as in 30 by 30 commitments, the Kigali Call to Action, the Miamba Forest Initiative, and in this first Africa Biodiversity Summit here in Botswana. The Keystone Partnership aims to focus collective efforts on safeguarding 162 irreplaceable protected areas across 33 countries. These landscapes have been identified as the most critical to Africa's ecological and economic future. Today, they store over 5.8 billion tons of carbon, provide water for 1 in 5 Africans, and support more than 70 million people whose lives and livelihoods depend on healthy ecosystems. The importance of the Keystone protected areas will only grow as Africa's population expands and its economies develop. The Rob Walton Foundation is proud to partner with African leaders, communities, NGOs, and funders to help mobilize the resources needed for lasting success. Working together, we aim to catalyze approximately $1.2 billion per year required to manage these areas effectively by committing our own funding and leveraging funding from national governments, multilateral institutions, and philanthropic partners. This represents more than $10 billion jointly mobilized by 2035. Our shared goal is simple but profound: to keep Africa's Keystone protected areas strong so they continue to anchor resilience, stability, and opportunity for generations to come. We are committed to walking this journey with you in respect, in partnership, and in shared purpose, so that nature and people may continue to thrive together. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Muito obrigada a Robo. pela preocupação com as áreas de conservação em África.
Conservation areas in Africa. And now I would like to give the floor to Conservation Force.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is John J. Jackson III, and I am speaking on behalf of Conservation Force and Dallas Safari Club. Allow me to congratulate the African Union and the government of Botswana, a nation that has long stood as a beacon of conservation leadership in Africa, for hosting a successful summit that marks the history on African leadership on biodiversity issues. We are pleased to be part of the historic event and pledge to support the implementation of its outcome. Biodiversity conservation cannot be reduced to biology alone. It must be understood at the ecosystem scale, where social, cultural, economic, and political systems are integral parts of the whole. When conservation works with and for local people, it creates an income, opportunity, and dignity, and it strengthens the very foundation of biodiversity protection. This allows for a balancing of interests between biodiversity conservation and socio-economic development needs as a widely accepted environmental management principle. We are pleased with the summit theme to place Africa first and the need for African solidarity, for Africa to be first when in global engagements. Madam Chair, we have growing concerns for the negative forces that divide Africa against itself and its own best interest. Far too often, external entities whose priorities lie with their donors rather than the African people and the African agenda have instigated division where unity is needed. It is time to put Africa first, to end divisive interference, to help African nations act together as one in unison for the greater good, to encourage, empower, and reward each other, rather than chastise or constrain or divide. It is time to make platforms like CITES work for Africa, not as platforms of obstruction and division, but as vehicles for solidarity, cooperation, and shared progress. And progress there has been. Each African member state's conservation achievements should be recognized and supported and rewarded, not undermined by agendas of others from outside of this continent. It is time for Africa's agenda to be first, Africa first, first for Africa. It is time to lead decisively and with unity, to approve a historic resolution at COP20 that establishes a clear and permanent mechanism for the participation of local communities who depend on wildlife resources. I speak specifically to the community issues that are coming up at the next CITES meeting in just a few weeks. It is not only fair, the same summit have recognized that the participant people living alongside wildlife is essential to the legitimacy of global conservation. I repeat, it's essential to the legitimacy of local conservation governance. And finally, Madam Chair, the African Union's initiative to strengthen coordination on multilateral environmental agreements and to unify African positions at CITES can be the most significant political development of our time. Consensus is the cornerstone of democracy, and unity is the foundation of strength. Acting together, one for all and all for one, will make Africa a greater force, a force to be reckoned with, instead of a whipping boy for the mistakes of others hundreds of years ago. In this spirit, I am honored to announce that Conservation Force, together with Dallas Safari Club, will support the Multilateral Environmental Agreement Unit of the African Union to help advance this vision of African leadership, unity. In conclusion, it is time for Africa to take charge of its own conservation destiny and narrative. That's all it's got to do. Take charge. It's got enough votes. For nations to be rewarded for success, not scorned for achievement. For Africa to vote together, stand together, and rise together. Put Africa first and be first. Know and put your own agenda before the agenda of third persons in other continents. All you need to do is act in unity. The world can be yours. Be one, be proud. Don't put up with division anymore. God bless unified Africa. Thank you.
Muito obrigada. Continuamos a apelar.
Thank you. We call for a united Africa. That's how we would like to be. I want to invite the Alliance for Indigenous Peoples and local communities on conservation in Africa, for conservation in Africa.
Penso que não está presente. Passaríamos então, depois.
Since they are not here, we are now, after listening to these motions of support, messages at this first summit on biodiversity in Africa, we're going to have a video clip on protected areas in Africa by Keystone. Please show the video.
Savannas, tropical forests, wetlands, Miombo woodlands, and sprawling deltas. The African continent is Earth's richest living mosaic of landscapes, wildlife, and people. Here, megafauna and humans to action by African leaders. We propose a bold new initiative, the Africa Keystone Protected Area Partnership. With African Parks, the Wildlife Conservation Society, Frankfurt Zoological Society, and the Rob Walton Foundation working side by side, we seek to partner with dozens of local NGOs and global funders to conserve nature while supporting communities. Too often, nature conservation is a story of merely slowing the inevitable decline. This partnership aims to permanently change the outcome for biodiversity and communities with unprecedented scale. Come help us build a future where nature and people thrive together. This is the Africa Keystone Protected Area Partnership. Sustainable savannas, tropical forests, wetlands, Miombo woodlands, and sprawling deltas. The African continent is Earth's richest living mosaic of landscapes, wildlife, and people. Here, megafauna and humans coexist unlike anywhere else in the world. These varied landscapes are not only beautiful, but also vital to the continent's future and our planet's health. Africa has been a world leader in resource protection, inventing community conservancies and establishing over 8,000 protected areas. Natural resources provide water, food, and livelihoods to millions. But pressure from growing industrialization and agricultural expansion is threatening these ecosystems. Now is the time for bold, coordinated action. In 2022, African leaders signed the Kigali Call to Action, identifying actions to strengthen Africa's protected areas and the Global Biodiversity Framework, pledging to protect 30% of lands and oceans by 2030. Across the continent, a network of solutions is underway. Sustainable agriculture, community-led conservancies, and wildlife corridors, all supported by strong national leadership. Over the last 2 years, scientists and conservation experts analyzed over 8,000 protected areas in Africa to identify 162 keystone protected areas disproportionately important for biodiversity and socio-economic success. Together, these landscapes shelter 71% of Africa's endangered species, provide water to 1 in 5 Africans, anchor economies for over 70 million people, and store 5.8 billion tons of carbon. Each is vast, on average the size of Yellowstone National Park, and irreplaceable. We call these places Keystone Protected Areas because lose them and the broader vision for conservation and economic security collapses. Conserve them and we support biodiversity, food, water, and jobs at a continental scale. Conserving these keystone protected areas will require innovative collaborations among conservation organizations, African governments, funders, and communities. African innovations like community conservancies and collaborative management partnerships have proven that effective management can scale. In a collaborative management partnership, governments retain ownership while partnering with conservation experts and communities to ensure that both people and nature flourish. In response to the call to action by African leaders, we propose a bold new initiative, the Africa Keystone Protected Area Partnership. With African Parks, the Wildlife Conservation Society, Frankfurt Zoological Society, and the Rob Walton Foundation working side by side, we seek to partner with dozens of local NGOs and global funders to conserve nature while supporting communities. Too often, nature conservation is a story of merely slowing the inevitable decline. This partnership aims to permanently change the outcome for biodiversity and communities with unprecedented scale. Come help us build a future where nature and people thrive together. This is the Africa Keystone Protected Area Partnership.
Instrument for all of us, and we have to together show that it is possible, and we can continue to work in the protection of our rich biodiversity. And without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to the Director of Ceremonies, reiterating my gratitude to all those who were involved in order to make sure that this summit was a successful one. Director Ceremonies, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Excellency Chairperson of African Union, Excellency Minister, Excellency Deputy Chairperson, Excellency Commissioner, and all Excellencies present, all protocols observed. We have now come to the final session of this very important summit. We shall have the first closing remarks from the host country, Honorable Minister of Environment of Tourism of Republic of Botswana, Mr. Winter Malotsi, will give the first remarks. Over to you, Excellency.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think in the last 2-3 days, what we did not tell you is that in the last athletic championships, Botswana got 2 gold medals in the 4x4 meters relay and then 400 meters. And we previously, have managed to get a gold medal for 200 meters. And I know that in Africa, name Teboho Litsile is very popular. It's very popular, and that guy comes from here. And the reason why we are so fast here in this country is because of biodiversity. It's because of biodiversity. Because we live around wild animals, some have to be running. And that is the exercise that makes us win. But having said that, AU Chair, Minister of Angola, my sister Ana Paula Chantra Luna Di Cavao, AUC, African Union Commission Deputy Chairperson, Her Excellency, Your Excellency, Selma Haddadi, African Union Chairperson, Commissioner, Your Excellency Moses Vilagati, Honorable Ministers, here present, heads of diplomatic agencies, heads of UN agencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. As we come to the close of the summit, allow me to express on behalf of the government and the people of the Republic of Botswana our appreciation to all of you for your presence, commitment towards Africa's prosperity. Over the past days, we have been a part of a key discussions and a renewed drive for implementation, which I believe will ensure that our biodiversity is protected, restored, and sustainably used for the benefit of the present and future generations. Throughout our engagements, we've been able to place biodiversity at the center of Africa's development agenda. We have reaffirmed that biodiversity is the core of our economic development and is interconnected with other sectors of our development. We live here today with a stronger shared understanding that investing in biodiversity means investing in Africa's future. Let me take this moment to thank the African Union Commission, our development and private sector partners who have supported this process and made this summit a reality. Your Excellencies, allow me to call for us to unite and engage with one voice in all international platforms in order to realize our aspirations as indicated in the Africa Agenda 2063. Let me take this opportunity again to thank the Africa groups of negotiators for leading in presenting a unified African position at meetings of multilateral environmental agreements. As we live here to attend upcoming meetings of the Minamata Convention, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, CITES, the Climate Change Convention, and the United Nations Environment Assembly, let us unite and be one Africa with a common position on issues. To our development partners and the private sector, please know that Africa is ready. Let us strengthen our partnerships and deliver on our common interests. As we close, I want to remind us all that Africa's success depends on our ability to translate the many decisions and action plans we have been agreeing to all these years, including today, into action. Implementation remains the only currency that we ought to pursue as a matter of urgency. With these words, Director of Ceremony, I would like to thank you all for your participation and commitment, and I wish you success in your other engagements, and I also wish you safe travels back home. I thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Excellency, for your closing remarks. The next closing remarks will be presented by Her Excellency, Madam Seuma Marika Haddad, Deputy Chairperson of African Union Commission. Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellency Ana Paula Chantreluna de Cavallo Pereira, Minister of Environment of the Republic of Angola, representing His Excellency João Lourenço, President of the Republic of Angola and Chairperson of the African Union, Excellency Winter Molotsi, Minister of Environment and Tourism of the Republic of Botswana, our host, Excellency Moses Vilakati, Commissioner of the African Union for Agriculture, Rural Development and Blue Economy, Honorable Ministers, Commissioners and Members of Parliament, distinguished delegates, allow me to stand by the established protocol. As we draw this transformative Africa Biodiversity Summit to a close, I stand before you filled with immense pride, renewed hope, and resolved commitment. Over the past 3 days, we have witnessed the convergence of minds, cultures, and commitments, all united by a singular purpose: to safeguard the rich tapestry of life that defines our continent. Our collective voice has been heard across Africa, from the savannas of the Serengeti to the rainforests of the Congo Basin, from the coral reefs of the Indian Oceans to the deserts of the Sahara, Namib, and Kalahari. The summit, the Gaborone Summit, has reaffirmed that biodiversity is not a peripheral issue. It is central to Africa's development agenda. The conversations held here in Gaborone have illuminated the urgent need to integrate biodiversity into our policies, planning, and investments. We have heard powerful testimonies from indigenous communities, youth leaders, scientists, and policymakers, each reminding us that conservation must be inclusive, equitable, and rooted in African realities and specificities. The African Union Commission remains steadfast in its commitment to championing a Pan-African approach that places biodiversity at the heart of our continental priorities, including in the implementation plan for Agenda 2063. The summit has also reminded us about the value of transboundary conservation, a concept that is in sync with the regional integration agenda of the African Union. Let us leave this summit not only with declarations and strategies, but with shared sense of responsibility. The road ahead demands bold action, action that transcends borders, sectors, and generations. We must mobilize domestic resources, harness traditional knowledge, embrace innovation, and forge strong partnerships with global allies. Above all, we must empower our youth and communities to become custodians of the ecosystems they depend on. Let me assure you that, as the African Union Commission, we shall develop an implementation and monitoring plan for the landmark declaration of Gaborone and report back at the appropriate time. Let us commit to the fact that the African Biodiversity Summit in Gaborone marks the inaugural convening of a series of summits to be held on a regular basis to translate the strategic nature of our effective contribution to the global biodiversity agenda, governance, and discourse. In closing, I extend my deepest gratitude to President Advocate Duma Boko and the people of Botswana for their warm hospitality and exemplary leadership. To every minister, delegate, expert, and organizers, and I would like to here notably mention the African Union Commission Secretariat. Thank you for your dedication and vision. Please allow me also to express our appreciation to the partners who supported this summit. The interpreters too have done very well. Let this summit be reminded not as an event, but as a turning point. Together, let us rise as one Africa, united in purpose, resilient in spirit, and unwavering in our commitment to protect the biodiversity that sustains us all. Thank you very much, and I wish you safe travels back home.
Thank you so much, Excellency Deputy Chairperson. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, Now we are going to have official closing statement by Chairperson of Africa. Excellency, you have the floor. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, biodiversity. I speak in Portuguese. Excelência.
Yes, Your Excellency, Winter Montelosi, Minister of Environment and Tourism of Botswana, Your Excellencies, representatives of heads of state and government, members of the African Union, Your Excellency, Ambassador Salma Haddadi, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, esteemed Commissioner of the African Union, distinguished bilateral and multilateral partners, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the final moment of our proceedings on biodiversity. Allow me to express my satisfaction and pride for this spirit of African unity. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to reiterate our profound gratitude to the government and people of Botswana for the warm and fraternal manner in which they welcomed all the delegations here, and for the excellent conditions put at our disposal that enable us to hold this summit with success. I would like, in this framework, to thank also to all representatives of head state and government of the African Union, development partners, and officials of the African Union for their commitment and contribution in the preparation of this very first Africa Summit on biodiversity. During the 4 days of a meeting, both the technical, ministerial, and heads of state and government segments, the participants were committed in addressing the issue of biodiversity conservation in Africa, which culminated with the adoption with a statement contained in the Declaration of Gaborone. Amongst these measures, allow me to highlight first the increased domestic financing and mobilization of international financing for biodiversity. Second, the preparation and implementation of national financing plans for biodiversity in order to bridge the gap in the financing. Third, the exploration of possibilities in the area of biodiversity, attracting private sector investment in order to ensure the sustainability of biodiversity in Africa. And fourth and lastly, the need in order to facilitate equitable access of African countries to the funds for the environment, GEF, and biodiversity, as well as multilateral financing mechanisms, including the Fund for Biodiversity Common and the Green Fund for the climate. I'd also like to stress the holistic approach that has been recommended by participants in order to include biodiversity in Africa and the full participation of the civil society and local communities, of women and youth in the decision-making processes and implementation plans of action. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to conclude my remarks appealing to all to commit themselves evermore to protect our natural legacy and adopt policies geared towards the conservation of biodiversity and sustainable development for Africa's prosperity. With these words, I would like to declare the First Africa Biodiversity Summit closed. Long live Africa. Long live biodiversity. Thank you very much. Muito obrigada. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Excellency Chairperson, for your closing of remarks. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, before we move to anthems, I just want to recognize and appreciate the government of the Republic of Botswana for the courtesy dinner we had yesterday.
And that brings to the end the official deliberations that obviously brought us to the adoption of the declaration, which is central to the framework that will bring about the management of biodiversity within the region among the 54 member countries who have pledged to establish a framework that will bring about necessary sustainability when it comes to biodiversity within the region. This has been a success given the various conversations that various speakers have taken to the podium, talking about the value of sustainability when it comes to biodiversity, not only for the benefit of the global community or even at a regional level, but what really also stands out from the conversations is that communities, individuals should really should be given priority in terms of welfare of an ordinary citizen of any country at the level of community should be able to benefit from the various endowments that every country has, and obviously understanding the makeup of every country's biodiversity framework.
Thank you so much, Excellencies. Thank you so much. Let's hang around in a few minutes for lunch. I wish you all the best. Safe travels back home.
That was the national anthem of Botswana, and of course the anthem, the AU national anthem, bringing to a close what has been a successful summit, which of course has been in the works for the past 4 days. And of course today being the last day, which started off with official conversations. The President, Advocate Duma Boko, officially opened the summit, and we also did have the AU chairperson as well as the AU deputy chairperson taking to the stage various sentiments as to how biodiversity at a regional level, at a national level, and at a global level should take shape. And we've heard conversations around the need for strengthening policy and governance within having, rather to help structure institutions and partnerships that would help member countries establish solid framework that would help in sustainability when it comes to biodiversity. And then we also had conversations around heads of state and government championing biodiversity, a clarion call for all stakeholders involved across the board, across sectors of development, to step up and implement a policy framework as well as any deliverables, any framework that will speak to ensuring sustainability is prioritized within the biodiversity framework. At this very moment, earlier on we were speaking to various stakeholders and delegates who are a major part of this summit. At this moment, I would like to speak to the BTO, Botswana Tourism Organization CEO, Mesitang, to just give us an outline of today's proceedings. Mesitang, thank you so much for joining us this fine afternoon. It has been a very successful summit. Maybe just a few takeaways from BTO with regards to what has been happening in the past few days to this very moment.
Some of the takeaways are very pleasing in the sense that, we as Africa are talking about biodiversity in terms of how we need to protect our biodiversity, how much we also have to account and understand how much value we may be able to draw from the biodiversity. And also talking about resilience, talking about ensuring that we minimize impacts of climate change, and also ensuring that we particularly ensure that we change the lives of the people for the better, using the natural resources that we have. And the commitment from countries, African countries particularly, saying we will do everything that has to be done to ensure that we take care of this biodiversity and not just conserve and preserve, but also ensure that as we preserve and conserve and utilize, we utilize and leave something for future generations, while at the same time ensuring that our people enjoy the benefits of value derived from this biodiversity, and that our people are not just spoon-fed, our people are also involved to ensure that the value derivation from the resources, they participate in such value derivation.
Talking about participation, where the direction in which Botswana is moving in with regards to her economy with the MICE strategy. As BTO, you are at the helm of what the MICE strategy should look like, how it should take shape, and the progress therein. Where are we as Botswana, and where do we aspire to be?
You would probably remember that we developed a MICE strategy, the rollout of which is commencing, and commencing of the strategy does not mean we have not been doing anything in terms of implementing ideals behind the MICE sector. MICE sector being meetings, incentives, conferencing, and exhibitions. This event is one event that falls so squarely within what we call MICE, and there is quite many other events that are planned by the country. Different government departments, private sector, and individuals that contribute to the realization of the dream that we have as a country and the government in terms of drawing value out of this sector, which other people call the business tourism sector.
And talking about the value that we're drawing from this sector, is it just the events tourism that we're talking about when we have an event of this magnitude? What are the other side benefits that we get from an event of this magnitude?
An event of this magnitude and other smaller events and different other types of events other than meetings, just exhibitions, and obviously incentives. You know, corporates and companies send their clients and staff out to various destinations as incentives for either the business they give them or for the hard work provided by staff or rendered by staff at offices. The entire mines sector benefits different sectors. It is an all-encompassing sector. The value chain that draws value from the mines sector is quite humongous. You know, here we are talking about those that provide, services such as, as you can see, setups were done for this room, those that provide audio visual equipment, those that provide media equipment, those that sell arts and crafts, nightclubs that offer entertainment, buses and transport sector that provides, transport, moving people from one point to the other when they attend such events, hotels that provide accommodation, or the entire accommodation sector, and also looking at the creative sector, which tends to become a huge part of MICE. As we roll out MICE, we would want to see this much more expanded to other sectors of the economy and many other linkages established with the MICE sector for a much broader beneficiation to trickle down to different business sectors. And the good thing about tourism is that it's an all-encompassing sector. It touches very many economic sectors, and MICE lends itself very well in terms of this. Now, looking at diversifying tourism away from wildlife, our mainstay right now is wildlife. You will never talk down on the value that wildlife provides for the tourism or to the tourism sector. But we are saying, yes, wildlife has given us a lot of value, continues to give us value, particularly that we utilize wildlife in a very sustainable manner. But we're also saying, let's look at other sectors, such as the MICE sector, to ensure that this value is not, if we are not putting our eggs in one basket, the value is distributed across all other possible areas where we can derive value.
And maybe just in your own words, as we wrap up this conversation, can we say this was a success, this summit, this inaugural summit, looking at the deliverables and obviously the expectations that you had for a summit of this nature?
Speaking from the tourism point of view, I'm very happy. The number of delegates that came here slept in hotels, they put up in hotels and accommodation establishments. And what we also did was to ensure that we also bring down those that provide different services, such that not everybody is provided for free lunch. Some bought their lunch. We brought in those that provide meals from private sector to set up stores, those that provide crafts, those that obviously also provide, your beverages like your coffees and everything else, and those that particularly communities that were community trusts that were here, that are a very important part of the narrative around biodiversity or taking care of the biodiversity. So from that standpoint and many other points that I may necessarily state here, it is a huge success. And we are very happy that our Minister Winter Muluzi was leading from the front. And the show or demonstration to Africa of just how serious our government is with regards issues of diversity. Imagine, we had Mr. President here, we had the Vice President here, we had cabinet ministers here, we had the Speaker of the National Assembly here, we had non-governmental organizations here, we had private sector here, we had institutions and individuals and scholars here, and community trusts as mentioned earlier. This all is a demonstration of how Botswana takes seriously issues of sustainability and biodiversity.
Mr. Tang, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Right, and of course, that was the BTO CEO giving us insights and, of course, helping us to wrap up what the summit meant in terms of the MICE strategy that BTO facilitates and spearheads, which obviously speaks to meetings, international conferences and meetings, which is pivotal framework or a pivotal aspect of direction Botswana is moving in terms of diversifying her economy. And of course, that was a very central, she mentioned very central points to where Botswana is moving. And of course, in terms of regional the regional aspects of her bringing together various partners to that effect. We continue with our conversation in terms of now talking to one other delegate who obviously has been integral to the participation here at the summit. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. Please take us through your key takeaways from this inaugural summit.
This has been very wonderful, especially for us who are in civil societies. I head the largest African conservation group, African Wildlife Foundation, working across the continent. This is what we've been waiting for, a strategy for biodiversity that covers the entire continent. There has been a very good demonstration of the leadership of the African Union. There's been very good discussion of the integration element of the biodiversity, because there's no one single country that is going to be successful in conserving and protecting biodiversity other than Africa working together to achieve the objectives of 2063, the Africa we want. There's also been this very good discussion on financing, which has been a very huge gap. Africa hosts 30% of the global biodiversity, and we receive less than 5% of the global financing for this country. Yet we are a huge contributor of stability of nature on this planet. So we've showed unity here. We've showed a plan. Africa has a strategy, and we are going to execute. So it's very, very exciting to hear the commitment from African governments.
And of course, the word execution brings in implementation, which is always a topical issue after every summit. How does implementation take shape beyond this summit in terms of the established partnerships and the linkages? What does it look like? What does implementation look like, and how should it be carried out differently?
No, from the conversation I've had with ministers here, there's a commitment from governments. There's a realization today that we are not going to be successful in our economic aspirations unless we take care of biodiversity as a framework for us to be successful. There's been a recognition here that Africa's wealth, majority of it is above the ground, and that's the biodiversity, and that we are not going to be successful in what we are trying to achieve without biodiversity. But also there's been commitment. There's been a commitment of $1.2 billion annually from a financier here in the room. Our organization has committed $30 million annually to spend behind the strategy for Africa. So there's been financial commitments, there have been policy commitments, and there's been commitment of leadership from the African Union. We are not going to be successful unless this is implemented as a pan-African strategy.
And talking about, one of the speakers talked to the issue of Africanism being very central to even, the conversations that were held. Talking about maybe the participation of people at community level, at youth level, women, how can we bring together all of those dynamics?
Look, the background to this is that conservation, just from the early days of introducing conservation and protection of wildlife on this continent, had a very colonial angle to it. And some of those practices are still continuing. We have been implementing and managing our biodiversity, thinking that the guns have been able to hold wildlife in place instead of awareness, instead of involvement, instead of participation of all Africans. And also Africans, we had outsourced that responsibility to international NGOs, to international funders. But the realization here has been, this is our responsibility. This is our heritage. This is our culture. This is our economic growth. We've got to step up to do it ourselves. But we can't do it without the majority of Africans involved. Those are the young Africans, 70%. So there's been a commitment. We've had the voices of young people here because this is their future. Biodiversity conservation is going to determine the future of this continent, and it's going to determine the future of the young Africans. That is so critical. There has been a realization that they are marginalized Africans, because we are all Africans, we are all indigenous to this continent. But the groups that are marginalized, that have voices and to be upheld in what we are trying to achieve in implementing this. These are the groups that are living in remote in these areas, in forestry communities, they live in national parks. Their voices are going to be critical, but most important, their culture is going to be critical because they have a knowledge in how to manage natural resources in Africa. Women are going to be critical. They are the managers of the young people. So leadership of women in this sector, 70% of natural resource management is led by women. So their involvement is going to be critical. So I'm not as much worried about implementation yet. We have the right policies in place. What has been missing is the political commitment to what we are trying to achieve. That has been achieved today.
And maybe just wrapping up this conversation, we've also heard conversations around incorporating the aspect of traditional and scientific policy framework. How do we bring that in as we wrap up this conversation?
No, science tells us now, computer models tell us now, experience tells us now, and history tells us Africans have been living with nature for thousands of years, and their knowledge is critical. What has changed is the economic aspirations that have been so globalized that now we need to manage. But we have to have a base and platform from our heritages and cultures. That's how we are going to advance as a continent.
Thank you so much for your time and for your insights.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And of course, that was the CEO of Africa Wildlife Foundation, bringing this conversation to an end on a very high note. And of course, rubber stamping what has already been said, reiterating what has already been said by various speakers across the board who speak one language of implementation, of diversity, and of course, coming together of all stakeholders to ensure that biodiversity is prioritized by all means possible at a local level, at a regional level, and of course at an international level. He also mentioned issues of funding, ensuring the necessary plow-in to ensure that in as much as there's policy framework in place, that finances also meet the policy framework at every point of need. And of course there's a lot to say. The summit, the 4-day summit has come to a close, and of course this was the inaugural Africa Biodiversity Summit, which has come to a close. And we end it here. I am Utsidile Onkabetse. Over to you, One.
All right, thank you so much, Atsidi. From the main hall, that's where activities end. But of course, we haven't officially ended all the activities for the summit. Right now, actually happening just on the grounds outside the main hall of the summit is we are seeing a symbolic act of actioning biodiversity management and protection. As we know that Botswana is on her journey to e-mobility. What is happening right now is we are seeing Honorable Minister of Environment and Tourism viewing and about to cut ribbon on a vehicle that is gifted to the department that is in charge of our biodiversity, Department of Wildlife and National Parks, a vehicle that is of e-mobility right there. That vehicle is being gifted to the Department of Wildlife and National Parks. This is the department and ministry that is government in charge of our biodiversity, and that ribbon there to be cut by the minister, Honorable Minister of Environment and Wildlife. But to close off this conversation, we are talking about the preservation, management, and protection of biodiversities as a source of life and livelihoods, but then of course so that our beautiful planet can be there even for future generations. So this is for the future of Africa, for one. But then talking about the future, we have the Global Youth Biodiversity Network that has taken an active role on this here consideration for the future of Africa. I'm sitting here from the network, and I believe you're a chairperson, Irene?
I'm for joint chapters.
Okay, I'm sitting here with a member of this network, the Network for Africa's Youth on Biodiversity. And this network was participating, this network was handing a declaration at this inaugural Africa Biodiversity Summit. Irene, let me take this time to welcome you. Thank you so much for coming through. If you just briefly let our viewers understand what this organ is, the network. Of course, it is functioning under the auspices of the overall continental effort, yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Irene, and I'm the coordinator of the Africa Regional Chapter of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. This is the official youth constituency under the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, UNCBD, and we rally, mobilize youth voices in advocacy as well as implementation of biodiversity frameworks in countries. We exist in all continents, and in Africa itself, we have 41 chapters, including one in Botswana that is very active, and that rallies more than 1 million youth under the network. Thank you.
Let's just quickly get into the issues here. So even at this inaugural Africa Biodiversity Summit, you have stepped up to the table as Africa's future, which is youth, and you actually have a declaration that was being signed or presented to this, well, along with the Gaborone Declaration. We'll call this the Gaborone Declaration. Yes, please speak to that.
Yeah, so information background from this declaration, it started from the third African Youth Summit on Biodiversity that was just held a few weeks ago in Kigali, Rwanda.
So let me just interject there. So the youth is going on to the third?
Yes.
No,
to the fourth, because the third just ended in Kigali, Rwanda.
Congratulations for being proactive Africa's youth.
Yes. The very first one happened virtually in 2022. The second one happened in Morocco, Rabat, in 2023, and the third one just happened recently in Kigali, Rwanda, hosted by the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, of course, with a few partners like the AWF, the IUCN, and with the government of Rwanda under the Ministry of Environment. And here we are carrying outcomes from that summit, which had over 200 youth participating physically and others virtually from 38 African countries. And that declaration was formulated there, and this First Africa Biodiversity Summit is presenting to us a platform to correct the outcomes and combine them with those that youth have gathered here to share a declaration that we hope will be adopted. And this declaration talks to everyone, every stakeholder, the government, civil society, and the private sector. Yeah.
Because the theme or the concern, the focus for the continental Africa approach, which is this, is around leveraging this biodiversity for prosperity. So we speak to issues of financing, we speak to issues of community ownership, and I want to understand if this aligns with the youth declaration that you just presented to this, the overall Africa Summit.
Yeah, thank you so much. So right now, referring to the Youth Summit's theme, which was consolidating African youth actions for the timely implementation of the biodiversity framework, it so much speaks to this, leveraging Africa's biodiversity for prosperity. It's like an action, actually, an activity that can be done, but young people are taking initiatives to already lead with local communities' engagement, of course, and centralizing youth at the middle of this to ensure that biodiversity is not just bringing youth in designing, but rather in co-creating. For example, the National Biodiversity and Strategic Action Plans that are implemented by every country that is party to the Convention on Biological Diversity. So youth also have a specific target under that framework that talks about youth, women, people, local communities, indigenous people, children, people with disabilities, all to be included, meaning-free. Meaning is not just in planning, but rather in implementation and also monitoring and considering, understanding the impact that is being done or the contributions that all people are bringing to the table towards biodiversity conservation.
It does feel a little bit like Africa is rediscovering her intelligence, because a part of the conversation throughout the 4 days has come to the fact that Africa's success in managing and handling biodiversity must speak to some indigenous intelligence there. And I want to find out from the Youth Declaration and how it is that you're going to align with the Continental Declaration, how much of rediscovering, or how much is Africa's youth, how much has Africa's youth considered the indigenous intelligence of Africa?
Yeah, first of all, we understand that indigenous people and local communities are the custodians of nature.
Yeah.
They have lived with nature, they have benefited from it, and they have nurtured or benefited with also conserving biodiversity in ways that the modern system cannot do.
Yes.
So we centralize them at the center of this, but also considering that they need their capacities built. And also, when we design these frameworks, we need to translate them in a language that is better understood by them to be able to contribute. But also, this whole work cannot be possible without bringing them resources, both financial and technical.
Yes.
And in this instance, there should be capacity building, first of all, of local communities or local grassroots organizations to be able to utilize those resources sustainably to benefit themselves, but also contributing to conservation.
All right.
Yeah.
And just for a brief moment there, let's take it back to just outside at the garden area. We're seeing the Honorable Minister actually cutting the ribbon off the vehicle that has been donated to the Department of Wildlife and National Parks right there. Symbolism of biodiversity management, preservation in action from fossil-powered fuel vehicles to symbolizing the move of using in national parks and in biodiversity conservation using e-mobility. Well, let's come back to close it off here, because it has oftentimes happened that youth would experience or decry barriers to entry or barriers to also of action. And when we're talking about leveraging biodiversity for prosperity, we're talking about engaging business, engaging financial generating methods. We are finding that the young people are at the crux, or at least the majority of the economically active population. Let's speak about that. How much of a role then does this or do you see yourselves as needing to take if we're going to leverage biodiversity for prosperity, seeing that you're the economically viable pulse of population? Yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah, youth, Africa, first of all, is considered as one of those with the most youthful population. And some of the countries, for example, Uganda, have almost 70% of their population as young people, youth. I mean, between up to 35 years and below. And this should be actually embraced as an opportunity to utilize young people's innovations, energy, and you know, the knowledge that they provide to build onto the contributions or policies that are going to govern biodiversity. But also, we need to start seeing youth as equal partners in the vision. Not to be brought on as contributors, but rather equal partners in the vision, in a way that if it is resource mobilizations, they are also capacitated on how to generate bankable projects that can bring in funding from the philanthropic sector. They also need to get mentorship opportunities to be able to contribute. We call it meaningful participation. It doesn't make sense giving youth a platform, giving them or inviting them to a conference to just sit back and listen. Their voices should be integrated into the policies that are being developed. Not only that, also continuing to engage them in co-implementing projects on ground that are going to generate impact on biodiversity conservation. So speaking lastly, to this declaration that we just shared to be adopted, we called upon world leaders to start seeing young people as partners or vision bearers towards biodiversity conservation, but also empower young people, avail direct financing that can support our innovations. And in that way, we think youth will have the capacity to equally contribute to the vision. They are not just the leaders of the future. We are the leaders of today, and the future belongs to us.
I want to believe that that point
yeah.
has been driven home very impactfully, Irene. Let me thank you right there for your contribution.
Yeah.
And of course, we'll be looking forward to action. We're moving from agreements into action. Thank you so much.
Thank you too.
All right, and of course, well, the mood generally that has come out of the summit is that this decade will have to shift. Transformation, change will have to be seen in the way that we're financing, in the way that we're consuming and producing, and in the way that we're taking ownership of biodiversity as one force, as continental Africa. Well, this is drawing us to the close of our broadcast of the inaugural Africa Biodiversity Summit, which is taking place here in Gaborone. And as it has been concluded, yes, Declaration Gaborone, if it will be called that, but a declaration that was drawn up here was just read out to us. And of course, the implementation or ratification of that is what we'll be looking forward to. Well, from the crew that is out here at the Royal Area here in Tlokeng, and myself, Honorable Kalakachani, we're going to put a wrap on it here and go back to BTV, to BTV News channel at the broadcaster station. It's a good afternoon from this side.